Welcome, everybody.
Looks like we've got close to a full house. Why don't we give folks 1 or 2 minutes to join? Now, let's see. And Marty, why don't we do I think we had built a quick little poll before we jump in, just so we give people a couple of minutes to make their way on. Do we want to give that a shot?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let me share my screen.
Do you need to? It popped up on my screen.
Oh, did it already
Yeah,
pop up? Okay.
yeah, popped up
So
on mine too.
we wanted to get a little bit of feedback from folks as we're jumping in to this topic. One, is your organization using or exploring AI code assistance today? It's very simple. Yes, no, maybe, not sure. I know that a lot of groups, the answer is yes, but be interesting to see what the distribution across today's participants are. And then as we look at the next question, how confident are you in your organization's AI code assistant controls and evaluation methods, right? And that's going to be a multi-select. So make sure you see all 5 options. So ranging from super confident, we've got this nailed, to yeah, right, right. And so we're seeing organizations in different areas around their controls, but we're not seeing a lot of organizations today super confident in this space. So one of the big areas of focus in today's session is going to be not only how do you accelerate uh, product delivery value, but also how do you do it without losing control? How do you maintain architectural integrity? How do you make sure you're evaluating as you go? And so you're taking a data-driven approach. Thank you for participating. It's always good to kind of see where folks are. Definitely on the confident side, on the control side, a little bit on the less confident side, which is good. So here are the results, and I'll stop sharing, and we'll get into the meat of today's presentation. Hand it over to Marty.
Cool. I was trying to look at the results, but I guess I'll have to wait. Hey, so a couple of things. Melissa and I love to talk, and it's even worse when we get together and we're talking about something we're excited about. But what we want to do is go ahead and take questions as we go. Jason or Eric, if you don't mind, if you see somebody's raising their hand or dropping in comments in the chat, if you can stop me, because I say this and then I won't pay attention to it. So
No, it's all good. I'll moderate.
all right. So what we want to talk to you today is, Melissa and I have been working through with her organization, and I've been working with other orgs, and we're looking at a lot of organizations trying to go AI first. And if you think about kind of an AI first development process, right? This is very kind of focused on the engineering practice from product to delivery. And so we're gonna get into more detail on that. But before we do that, Melissa, do you want to just kind of give a overview of your background and
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So I'm super excited to be here. So thank you, Marty and Jason, for having me, and Eric. And yeah, so I've been in the industry, for 2+ decades. Feels like just yesterday.
Careful.
Uh, feels like just yesterday, but yeah, and I grew up through the ranks, as I like to say. I was a software engineer for a very, very long time, before moving into leadership roles, and done a lot of different roles in my career and transformations. And so currently, I'm leading our government solutions team as the CTO at LexisNexis. And as Marty mentioned, we've been working together on a lot of different ideas around what does AI first mean for us? How do we, start to formulate that vision and begin down that journey for the teams. So as we think about it, we tend to think it's more than just tech. So really, really excited to dive into this AI product operating system topic today.
Cool. All right, let's start off with some scary stats, right? So we'll talk about, I guess before we go through the stats, let's talk about what we're going to talk about. So first of all, it's a webinar, so we got to talk about the crisis that we're facing right now, right? The interesting thing is Pharos just came out with its 2026 telemetry reveals, and we'll talk about that and some of the numbers that I find fascinating. They scared me a little bit. I didn't expect them to be the way they were, but we'll get into those. We'll talk a little bit about why this problem is kind of structural. We need to, and which is good because I think that leads us to a way to figure it out, right? We'll talk through the 5 pillars of the AI product operating system, and then. But one of the things that I do want to talk about is we're going to go through and we're going to try to give you specific use cases and things that we're actually doing, right? So I don't want you to think this is just going to be some high-level gloss over and, we have 5 pillars because we're a consulting company. These are things that we're actually working through together. And because of that, it's a big topic. So what's going to happen is we're going to have a series of webinars. We'll get them scheduled fairly soon. And we're going to do a deeper dive into each of these topics. I mean, I can easily see at least 5 that we can get into very detailed where we can actually maybe even show some code, walk through some examples, talk about how product and delivery are going to really even more tightly integrate than we used to. And so more future webinars will be coming up. We're going to talk about a governed AI delivery process, which I'm totally excited about. And then where do you get started? Right. So we'll get some practical sequence of how to get started, talk about some assessments that we have. So the beginning of this, right, it's basically this crisis that nobody saw coming. And so Pharos did a survey, 22,000 developers across 4,000 teams, right? And then this is what they see. Now, Melissa, have you seen, I know like your team's just recently, like I would say within months, started using this, but everybody kind of jumped in with both feet. Are you starting to see these kind of number? I mean, probably not this high yet, but are you starting to see this kind of trend this way, or are you still chugging through the data?
I think we are still chugging through the data, but I do think that we have seen throughput being up. I just had a really recent example where we were asked to do something to win some new business. And, we had estimated, 10 to 15 days to do the work. And one of the developers basically said, let me try Claude Code. And they had it done within a matter of 2 days, right? So it took, our estimate from 15 days down to 2 days. And it also provided us an opportunity to really have some knowledge transfer with some of the teams that we didn't, previously focus on. I do think quality continues to be a challenge. I think there's a lot of opportunity to build in the proper guardrails and gates so that we can make sure quality isn't an issue. But yeah, definitely consistent with these numbers.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was actually speaking to one of your senior developers out in South Africa today, and I asked him, and the South Africans are so polite, right? And I said to him, so are you starting to see this? Are you starting to see more PRs coming through? And he just smiled and laughed. And I said, are you getting any time to write code? And he said yes, as he was picking up his baby and holding it. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, so you're playing dad duty and you're trying to write code. In the meantime, you have all these new PRs that you have to get through. So I think there is some process that we're going to have to get through and understanding. One of the things that Melissa and I have been very clear about as we're introducing this and talking to the development teams is that no matter how much you have these coding agents, you're still responsible. Developers are still responsible for the code, right? It can't be like the early days of ChatGPT, right? Where everybody was just writing essay, right? All of a sudden, everybody's an expert and they're writing documentation and not reading it. And they're putting things out and you would ask them about it. And they had no idea what they wrote 2 weeks ago because ChatGPT wrote it and they never really validated it. So it's the same kind of thing, except now we're talking about your customer data, your security, and things that go into production, right? So these numbers they're scary to me, right?
I think, sorry,
so-
just one other thing to add there. I think the scarier part of some of these numbers is that this is what, executive leadership is seeing and expects as well, right? And so there's certainly a little bit of a misconception, right? That we can introduce these coding agents and things are just going to be better and faster and there aren't going to be challenges. And so I think, that's something that we have to pay attention to is how do we make sure that we still have, high throughput and also keep the quality and set those expectations appropriately with the executive leaders because obviously that can be a very, very big challenge if there's that kind of disconnect. So
yeah, and the great news is we're going to talk about that in a couple
yeah.
slides, right? Yeah. So won't spend too much. I kind of beating this thing to death, but what we've seen is that task completion's going up, more epics are getting done, more code specific task throughput. The things we're seeing now is that the bottleneck has kind of changed. Right now, all of a sudden, we can develop and write code really fast. So now it's starting to expose the weaknesses in the rest of our systems, right? And we're going to talk through that and some of the things that we're doing to resolve those things. So,
Hey, Marty, just to jump in,
sure.
as questions are coming in, someone was asking, hey, what do we mean by a PR? Right. And so, just
yeah. It's a pull request. So what happens is when a developer makes a change, they'll go in and they'll make some changes and then they'll check it into their source code repository. And usually there's a protection on the repository that it doesn't automatically go into the main branch, which would then continue it on the process. So what happens is there's this thing called a pull request that gets generated. And then usually somebody, not the person that created it, has to review that and approve that the code was done according to standard. There are usually review requirements that a senior developer will follow to validate that it's good to go, and they either push approve and it gets merged in, or they reject it and it goes back to the developer with some things that they need to fix. The interesting thing is that we're talking about generating code. There are some pretty cool products. I mean, obviously you can use Claude Code, but there's also a product called QuotoGen that will apply AI to your pull requests, right? Which is kind of an interesting thing to think about, right? So we generate it with AI. We have AI look at it and validate it. So, but those products are doing pretty well, and they're starting to come into existence too. Anything else?
That's it for now.
Nope. All right, cool. Yeah, so this is where it starts getting interesting, right? So when we talk about DORA scores and there are DORA metrics and these are scores that's it's basically DORA is a survey, and then the Pharos is actual findings, right? So the thing is what's happening is that from these the scores, developers are happy, right? They feel good. It feels like they're getting more done. But what they're finding is that just having a mature DevOps, and then in this case the high DORA scores where frequency of delivery is better, lead time. I always say it's backwards. Lead time is decreasing, and things like that. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be successful when you go to these coding agents. Anything to add before I blow through this slide, Melissa?
Nope. No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right. So basically, this is what I was talking about. So the DORA survey, developers feel great. The actual data is we should be afraid for our lives, right? So things are good now in the short term, but what's happening is we have this looming problem that's kind of waiting for us, and we need to figure out how do we deal with that? How do we handle that? And so what's happening is right now what we're starting to see is that our highest paid resources, the ones that we're expecting to help us get things done, we're starting to put even more pressure on them. Right now, people are letting things slide through, and our senior developers, our architects are are getting bogged down with more time, more reviews they have to do. The size of the changes are getting bigger. Typically, you want PR requests to be small lines of code. So, for example, if I'm a developer, I want to be checking in code like every 15 minutes, every hour, not at the end of the day. And with AI, if you use that as a habit, you can write a lot of code in one day, right? With
Yep.
the AI generated code. And then you have a PR request that's 18, 20 pages of code. So it's even harder for a senior developer to review. All right, enough with the stats. So when we see these numbers, the instinct is, and you'll hear a lot of people start talking about guardrails. And guardrails are good, but the instinct to tighten up at the back end is not the right way to look at it, right? And the answer is something that, Melissa, how many times have you said, let's move this left, let's move the process left, right? What we're seeing more and more is that the upfront quality and how we're doing that is that's the way to solve this problem, right? And if I hear Melissa say gherkin one more time, I'm gonna.
I've only been talking about that for 20 years.
Yeah,
and shift left for 19. No.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because and we'll talk about it. And the nice thing about AI is that it's starting to make things like that even more reachable, right?
Yeah.
The reason I bring that up is Melissa and I have known each other. We've worked off and on for close to 20 years. And I remember our first time I mentioned gherkin, she was like, "Oh my God, I can't get anybody to write gherkin." I go, "Yeah, I know, it's next to impossible." So, all right, so let's get into the AI product operating system. And so what is it that we're talking about? It's just we want to put some structure around this, right? And some of this, if you take AI out of it, if you just take AI out of the words, it's not different than what we need to do today. It's just we've been very lax. And what we've been able to do in the past is, if you think about, like, let's take it down to like the very core of how we do development today, right? If you take it down to the user story, what happens? We write this user story. User story is, conversation. And the acceptance criteria, I'm just going to be honest, it's vague, right? It's not really always thought out very well. Maybe it's got some detail in it. There aren't a lot of business rules. So developers sitting there looking at this user story, and they know they don't have all the information because they never have, they don't fight it, and they start a sprint to write some code. So what happens? They sit down, they start writing some code, and they go, you know what? I don't know what to do here. Let me call a product owner or product manager. They get them on the phone. Hopefully it's within the same day. Get them on the phone. They go through that. They have a discussion, and developers like, okay, cool, I got it. So they write a little bit more code, and then they run into another problem. It's like, well, what happens if the user's in the middle of this transaction and then they just they delete their account? What do we do with the pending transaction? Do we let it go through or do we stop it? Well, I'm not really sure. Let me call product manager, figure out what we do about that. Okay, cool. And so so what's happened is, because we have this long-standing conversation, we have time to kind of meander through solving the problem, right? And that meandering through solving the problem is the reason we're hardly ever good at hitting dates, right? Because we're never really sure. We're always hitting some fuzzy target. And then we all know how that goes when we're talking to a requirement. It's like, oh, hey, what else would be good if it did this? Oh, yeah, it doesn't seem so hard. I'll add that in too, right? And so what ends up happening is with AI generated code now, we don't have that kind of time, right? You sit down, you prompt it, if you're just kind of loosely working with it, you prompt it, you describe what the problem is, and it starts making assumptions. It gives you a lot of great suggestions. So you just say, yeah, and you kind of pair program through this problem. You come out with something on the other end. Product manager looks at it and they're like, I have no idea what that is. Not what I asked for. And so now we have to rework it, right? We have to start that cycle again. So we need to double down on fixing this problem, because it's even more apparent now than it was before. So we want to start and talk about evidence back, right? And when we get into the next couple of slides, I think Melissa's gonna kind of walk through some ideas that she's working on there, and we'll get into more details of what that is. But from the evidence backed is that, with AI, not only development can be faster, but product management, right? I was listening to a podcast. What's that dude's name? Kagan, Marty Kagan. You would think I would know his first name. It's the same as mine. So Marty Kagan was doing a podcast, and he was basically like, look, I used to tell product managers to do 100 prototypes a week. And I'm thinking, really? Did he used to say that? That's a lot, And then he goes, and now we can do that, right? We have AI, so we can start pumping out prototypes, but we have to be able to collect the information when it comes back, right? So we want to make sure that with AI, we can now start getting better evidence-backed proof of things that we want to do. And then when we move that in, once we prove that, we need some sort of governed way to implement this. So, you hear the term go slow to go fast, right? So what is it that we need to do up front to make sure that when we unleash these coding agents, they're following the processes we want them to follow? And then there needs to be some sort of evaluation, not just as it's going through the framework or through the life cycle, but before the release, right? When we get to a release, we should be able to say it should be a 10-minute decision, not this, I don't know, well, all the tests passed. Well, that's cool. This was okay. And product manager, we did a demo and they liked it. And so you have these 2-hour conversations, and then you finally decide, you make a best guess as to whether you can release it, right? We want that to be more statistics based, and it should be a quick decision. And as we get into large language models, the evaluation of the responses, not only during our pipeline, but that once it gets out into production, are we staying within our boundaries? And then after deployment, obviously, we want to continuously improve. We can feed that information back in, and there are ways to use AI to help us figure out where that goes. All right, I promised I was going to let Melissa talk right after this. So we're going to go through, jump in, but then what we're going to do in the next bunch of slides is we're going to go into detail on each of these pillars. But these are the 5 pillars of the life cycle, right? So they're all important, but I think the product and customer intelligence, this is where we want to be thinking about, are we building the right thing? How we prototyped it? How do we have proof? What's our proof point? Why are we building this thing? How are we going to make money, right? And then we want to be able to move that into prototypes and prototypes, which are kind of just a shorter version. It's this new term. I don't know, Jason, I think you introduced me to it, but what was the distinction between a prototype and a prototype?
Yeah, so the idea around a prototype is it should take less than 4 hours and maybe even closer to 2. All right, so it's like, what's the thinnest sliced solution that we can visualize whether this is something that a team would want to spend time on. All right.
Okay.
So that's the idea. Came out of Google.
Yeah. Melissa, do you want to wait until we get into the detail slides on talking about some of the work you're doing?
I mean, I can start to chat about it.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we have been looking at is how do we take all of this data, right? So we have a lot of feedback from our customers. We use a tool called Gong to record all of the customer calls and get that data. And what I started to notice is that data never seems to actually get to our product and tech teams, right? So we have Gong, we have, a tool where we put all of our epics and features, and then we have, Jira or an ADO board where the development teams are working. And what we started to kind of realize is, we would deliver things and we'd have our commercial team saying, that's great, but that's not at all what the customer wanted. And so I started to think about, well, where is this breakdown? Where is this gap, right? Certainly we should be having the conversations and we should be using the information that that the customers are telling us, right? They're telling us what they want and what they need. And so we've been working on a project where we can start to pull some of the information out of Gong and get that into our AHA boards, and then ultimately create a Figma prototype of sorts where we now have a real, thing that we can bring back to the customers and say, is this kind of what you were thinking, right? Is this what you're, and have those conversations, and then give that to our product and tech teams, right? And say, okay, guys, this is actually what's going to land with our customers, right? And so it really does bring the commercial teams, the product and tech teams closer together, and we're actually then using the data that we're getting from these conversations to inform what and how we need to build things. And just kind of going back to what Jason was mentioning about what a prototype is, one of the other challenges that we've been facing is this whole notion of thin slicing. And so what's really great about, some of the work that we've been doing is these coding agents can help with thin slicing and getting to these prototypes faster, and not having to go into, large workshops and really teaching people, how to break down code and how to do all of these things, right? These coding agents are helping with those types of things as well. So we are able to now actually get potential solutions in the hands of our customers faster, have them respond to it, and then go build it pretty quickly and be able to release faster. So,
yeah, I mean, I think that's a great, the thin slicing thing is a great point, right? If we can prototype these things out and figure out that feature slice faster, then we're doing just that feature slice, not 27 things at a time. And so it does encourage that thin slicing. And if you take that into the next step, which is where we want to accelerate the development, is that we can take that information and turn it into a feature package, right? And that feature package would be, it would be Gherkin, because if I don't use Gherkin somewhere, I'm gonna not get paid. So anyhow, we got the Gherkin NFRs, right? Which do get missed, which is amazing to me that we push things into production and all of a sudden, too many users hit it and it starts to come down. It's like, how did we let that slip to the right? And I'm not talking about I'm talking about other places I've been, but not organizations I was running. Yeah.
So we got a question for the non-Gherkin fanatics.
Oh, okay.
You want to talk about Gherkin for just 1 second? Because we got a couple of folks who were go ahead and heard
just
about
one. I don't know if I can talk about it in just 1 second. I mean, it's like,
yeah.
All right. So Gherkin is really and we'll actually get into detail on one of the things, but Gherkin is a structured way to write the behaviors of the system, right? And so it started and people used to call it behavior-driven development, and Gherkin was the language that did that. It kind of sat on top of these test-driven development tests, but it's a very structured way where you have a feature, then you have scenarios for that feature, and it would describe the business rules that you wanted it to apply. Didn't describe how to code it, but basically it gave you a structured way to describe what you wanted the system to do. Now, while people like Melissa and I love it, I've always tried to teach, back in the days when I was doing agile coaching, I would try to get product managers to write this Gherkin structured files. And it's difficult, right? Like it seems like there's not too many words, there's not a lot of rules on the syntax, but it does get complicated. But what obviously we're doing now is with AI, you can take it into ChatGPT, but if I have a good set of requirements coming out of my epic or my feature, probably at the feature level, I can then feed that to ChatGPT. We're doing it with AHA. We built AHA agents that do this. And what it'll do is it'll take the requirements that the product managers put and the NFRs, and it'll actually generate the Gherkin and a structured list of NFRs for them. So it's hard to describe Gherkin without waving my hands and actually drawing some, but just suffice to say, it's a structured rule language. Yeah, thank you for stopping me.
Okay. That's all good.
Yeah, and what we're seeing though too is just like we found with ChatGPT and things like that, when you can give it more structured documents, it performs better, right? Like if you can give ChatGPT a markdown file or a JSON file, and JSON files are like tiered file, it performs better. We found that the coding agents are the same. If you give it a structured Gherkin file with the NFRs, it now gives it a better reference of what you want to do. So instead of having these lengthy prompts that developers are using, where it's like, hey, I want you to follow this, and here are the rules, and basically you're taking the full feature set and trying to feed it in and figure out how to translate it. If you go to the step of creating the gherkin first, and then you work together with your product owner to refine that. By the time you get to the coding agent, it has the prompt sequencing is it's a lot clearer, and then you also have something to hang as you go through and you want to audit back to the feature that you built.
Yeah, I think, the one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of Gherkin too is, again, it brings technology closer to what we're expecting the system to do, right? It is really about the behavior that we're expecting versus just, go build this or go update that table. And, oftentimes it does challenge the product managers too to think differently about how they're describing what needs to be built, right? And I think it does drive the right conversations that, have historically, I think, been missing. And that's why we end up with the disconnect of this is what we've built. And it's like, well, that's not what the customer wants. We actually describe how what the behavior is that we want to happen, then I think we end up with a lot better solutions. And to Marty's point, I think with all these coding agents, it does help to ensure that you have a much better and more robust solution coming out of those agents.
Yeah. Yeah, and then if we take it through to the control tower, basically this is where we all have CI/CD pipelines that we run, right? So continuous integration of the code into a main code base so that everybody's using the same code, and then some sort of continuous delivery, whether we're pushing it to a staging environment or to a red-green environment so that we can run our security tests against it and things like that, right? So, so in these processes, what we want to make sure is that since the code is being written so fast, we want to make sure that our control towers can keep up, right? So we want to validate as we're going through. So if we're saying, if we make the statement that, hey, if your specs are better at the beginning, as I'm running through my pipeline, I want to validate that when I get to the pipeline, that I still have connection back to that spec, right? Because there are ways to, the developers can get around it, right? Most people aren't being nefarious, but when you get under pressure, people have a tendency to skirt corners, right? So what we want to do is we need some way to make sure that we still trust our system as it moves forward, right? And we can put not only the kind of red-green refactor test, a yes or no, but also some of the less determinate, like the probabilistic type testing that we need for our Gen AI apps, right? Whether it's groundedness scores or correctness or LLM as a judge validating those responses, right? So we want to make sure that we have a full package of information, and that instrumentation that we're collecting is getting back into our system, right? Because we can see things from that. If we feed it back into something like, let's say we pump it into Datadog and then feed that all the way back into the beginning, so that we're not only collecting data from Gong, but we're also bringing in, hey, what are we seeing in the system? It's dropping here, or the response rates are lowering. Maybe a person hasn't seen it, maybe a customer hasn't called in, but if we feed that back into the PCI center, it's going to go, hey, what can we do about this? Are we seeing anything? Do we need to test this, right? So we can build that continuous loop in the process. And then we get to incremental support. Some of your teams, Melissa, are starting to look at using these coding agents to actually do break fix, right? Like, so we actually go into, do you have specific examples that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so we actually we actually have a significant number of applications that we support through acquisitions that we've done over the years. And when we built our production support team, many of them had never coded in some of these languages, and that becomes very challenging, right, to support things, especially when you've got outage issues and customers, screaming because things are down and they're not happy. We need to be able to fix things fast. And we've essentially made using things like Claude Code and GitHub Copilot part of our DNA, specifically in that team. That was actually probably one of the first teams that heavily adopted some of these agents to help them with understanding this legacy code that they had inherited, right? So it's been a very successful use of those agents and helping us to not only just fix bugs, but also it helps folks to or it helps the folks to really think about, like, do I refactor this? Do I, think about this in a larger way than just, continuing to chip away at fixing defects? So that's been a very very big area where we've used these agents, and it's been super helpful and really upskilled our developers. And it's also helped to delight our customers because we're able to solve these problems in some cases more holistically than we had been in the past. So.
Yeah, and then you said something that I don't know if people necessarily caught, but you were doing this probably before you started tackling the other pillars, right? So
Yeah.
the thing is we're going to talk about how to get started, but the point is get started. Doesn't matter. You can attack some pieces of each pillar as you go. It doesn't have to be, hey, we got to get everything on the left, right first, and then we go next. This isn't necessarily a workflow, right? It's an iterative process across all of the pillars back and forth, right?
Yeah. I think thinking about which of the pieces of the pillars actually fit what parts of your organization and the problems you're trying to solve for is super helpful, right? And being able to get, like you said, just get started, just roll up your sleeves, get moving, and you'll find the value very quickly.
Yeah, and accelerating, like we talk about quick wins all the time, right? So the idea is that when we're looking at these AI, I hesitate to call it transformation, but as we move into doing more work with AI, when we look at the strategy across the organization, it's like, oh my God, this is going to take us years to get to this. But there are a lot of things that we can get done in a week, and the next 2 weeks, and we can build on these things while we're working through our strategy. So don't forget about these kind of quick wins that you can hit, right? There's no reason why you can't start going after production defects now, right? Mm-hmm. So in here, we're going to break down each of these cards. Now, if we've already talked about it, we'll move through fairly quickly. But one of the things I want you to notice on these cards is the target AI to human. Doesn't mean that we've gotten there yet, but as we look at these things, Melissa and I have been going back and forth, like, I don't know, I think we could completely get rid of the human in this process. And she's like, no, you can't. It's product, right? Somebody needs to look at it. Somebody needs to stop it. And I'm like, come on. But so we kind of talked through the targets. And again, don't have to get there right away. But I think if our goal is to get to a target, so like, for example, Melissa, if I give too much away, tell me. But Melissa's idea in this area is more agent based. It's not streamlining the workflow, right? And it's a big difference, right, between the two. So do you want to talk a little bit more about this, or?
Yeah. I mean, it literally is, an agent that can go and look at the data in Gong, relevant data, right? And that's where, maybe a human needs to be involved to make sure that what we are pulling is actually going to hit the mark and that we're being able to have the right conversations. But it really is, pulling, creating this agent that pulls information from the sales tools where those conversations are being recorded and we're hearing directly from our customers, all the way to creating this, this prototype or this Figma click through that we can quickly turn around and give back to our sales folks and then ultimately our developers and product folks. So
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, because you think about that process is that you may start out with a couple of workflow pieces, but then what we do is we challenge each other on, hey, could we take out the human part here, right? So we talk about as we look at the data, you have to kind of categorize it, right? Because you don't want to just pump everything through to the customer, right? But that categorization, there are some ML techniques that we could use, and then some, just like they do when they're training for images and things like that, we have some humans respond. And so we could kind of train the system on how to pick the right things to do the prototype or the prototype, right? So we might start with a system that's 60-40, and then as we get through some of this, we can start chinking it up or moving it up until 70, 80, up to 90%, right? And so that should be what our goal is. We should, every problem that we're trying to solve, if we're trying to think like an AI first organization, is challenge the hypothesis that a person needs to be here. I'm not saying wipe them out. I'm saying, why do I need a person here? Is it to validate something? Is it to do a rote task? If it is, then the AI should be doing that. If it's cognitive, if it's something that requires intelligence, then Jason would argue it shouldn't be me doing it, but somebody else, right? That should be somebody that knows how to take care of that and do it. But we should be looking at that. And I think that's the fun part of doing this type of work right now. It's pretty challenging.
Well, and it's also giving us access to data that we may not have otherwise had access to, right? Like when I think about this agent that we're building, nobody is going to go through the thousands of phone calls, right, that Gong has logged and try to, gather the type of information that is going to be useful to the product and technology teams, right? It's just not going to happen. Nobody's going to have time for that, and no company is going to want to, pay for somebody to do that kind of work, right? So having an agent actually comb through that type of data and pull out the relevant information, but then having a person validate that it is in fact relevant, I think is critical. So
yeah. Well, and then it gets to the next thing, right? How do you do not only the rapid validation? So let's say we have a perfect world, and we're coming in and we're pulling in all the Gong data, and we identify 100 prototypes like Marty Kagan wants us to have, and so we decide that somehow we're going to filter them to different clients and they're going to take a look at it. Well, then we need a way to basically validate those responses, right? Like, so then what do? Right? We have all this out there. They look at it. How do we collect that information? And again, bring it back to a person to then make a decision, right? So that kind of brings it, because I think this rapid validation is the thing that perplexes me the most. It's like, if I have a prototype, what I've done in the past is that you sit down and you either watch the client go through it, or you have a team of people that go through the UI. But I think if we can get ideas out to our clients faster without burdening them, right? And then they have a way to respond and we can collect that, I think we can kind of tie these together. I get my own panel. So, but anyhow, accelerated development, not going to, we talked about this a lot, right? So every feature needs to be carried forward the evidence, right? So if we go from prototype and then we get the output from validation and we have a validated idea, once that product owner or product manager says, yes, this idea I want to push to my customer, that's when development gets involved. Up until then, it's all product. It's part of the AI POS system. And then when you push, let's go forward. Now what we want to be able to do is, based on that information that we've got, if we can then build that feature set, right? If we can dynamically generate the Gherkin, the NFRs, and the evaluation criteria based on the responses that we got, then we have a good initial draft of a feature set that we want development to move forward on. At that point, the development team can then sit down, go through, they can review the prototypes or prototype either that were attached to that, have a conversation with the product manager and fine tune that feature package. And at that point, the prompt to the coding agent is plan feature X, right? And it's going to go, right? And that's what we want, because if we have all of that in our repository, as we build that out, we can directly drive, we have a direct lineage of this got into production because of this request, this prototype, and these customers. right? And that's not nirvana. I mean, that's very, very doable in today's day and age. Right? And then the control tower, I already talked about this, but that I think should be almost that automation part should be as non-human as possible, except for reviews, right? Anytime it pops up and says, hey, I see something I don't like, that's when a human should get involved. And then support improvement, Melissa talked about some of the things they're doing there. I think as we continue to move, we'll see more and more of that. There was talk earlier, Copilot, has agents that are specific to this, where it'll actually review your repository and find defects, and it'll actually create its own branch. So a branch is basically, it pulls code off of the main, so it's not in the way, and it pulls it off kind of into a sandbox area, makes changes to it, and then creates a PR, right? Remember, we talked about that PR, create a PR for a senior developer to then review. So all of that up until the senior developer reviewing it was completely automated by Copilot, right? Mm-hmm. And so things like that are happening today, right? In large organizations. Apparently, I thought spectrum development is really important. I couldn't stop talking about it. I will move forward. But the point I want to make here is that as we moved and we get excited about these coding agents, the biggest thing I'm seeing is that we can't rely on the prompts. The prompts are transient. It's like, well, they are, right? So as a developer, if I sit down, I talk to somebody and I say, hey, these are the requirements, I'm basically typing them in like I'm creating a Word document. And then I'm pushing a button and that goes into some agent memory. And I work off of that. And then if that memory gets compressed, I start to lose fidelity, right? So it's not a good way to take it forward, right? Next developer comes in, they have no idea how or why we built the product the way we built it, right? There's nothing to connect it. And the problem we're running into now is because building the code is so much easier, developers are getting in front of the product teams. And I argued this way back in the day, and I'll argue it today. As much as I love developers, we are not the ones that should be telling you what problems to solve, right? It's the wrong place to put it, right? So, all right. And then, we talked that basically Eddy 360 is our response to how do we take and start to make these evaluation metrics first-class citizens, right? How do we make everything continuous and not, hey, let's go look at the data today? It needs to be constant. It needs to be part of the flow. And then this bidirectional observability, basically what I mean there is as the features go through and we're collecting data, we want to get all that telemetry data and push it back into the system. And maybe if it's a defect, it goes right to the last pillar 5. If it looks like it's something systemic, maybe we send it all the way back to the beginning and we have product management look at it and figure out if there's a misunderstanding, a feature gap or whatever, right? And then, the more that we can have actionable insights, one of these webinars will go through our insights portal. If that name, I'm not sure if that name's going to land, but or stick. But the Insights portal has a ton of actionable data, and this type of process would feed that, right? I go backwards.
You did.
There you go. I kept wondering.
Super stuck on spectrum and development.
I know, he really loves it.
Yeah, I saw Jason get ready to kick me out of the meeting. I was like, wait a minute, so you. So.
And don't talk about Gherkin anymore either.
I'm not bringing it up anymore, right? And so product intent, right? So what happens is that it needs to be tightly connected. No more interpretive development and expansive maintenance. So I won't go through that. I think we talked about this enough. Melissa, is there anything here you want to add?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered most of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I said down the bottom, shift left is still a thing, right? We want to move things left, right? including security and everything else, right? A lot of these coding agents have the ability to plug in MCP tools, and some of the security agents like Sneak and things like that. I don't think Verico has one yet, but you can plug it in. So while you're building your code, it's evaluating against security responses, so that you're building secure code from the beginning.
Cool.
All right. So just to, some of the things to think about for going forward, right? We have a capability assessment. If you scan the barcode, it'll send you to our AI POS page, which you can then follow some links, and we can get you hooked up with an assessment framework. But what we really want to be able to do is you have to be able to capture and qualify your product signals. And so down the left-hand side are the capabilities that we run through in the assessment. I'm assuming if there are any questions, you're just going to pop in. But and if you have questions, start bringing them in. We've got 10 minutes left. So we're going to go through, and we have these 5 capabilities, right? So there's the sense. And these align to the pillars, right? So sense, how do we capture, validate? How do we deliver consistently? How do we govern this? How do we control it? If you want to call it guardrails, great. It's the same concept, right? How do we control what's happening? And it's not at the back end. It starts at the beginning. And then we want to be able to evolve our production signals. And so where to start? We talked about this. You don't have to start at a particular pillar, but I think where we are today, and Melissa, stop me if you don't agree, where we are today is that development's moving too fast.
Yeah.
And if product doesn't catch up, or if we allow that to continue, we're going to build a lot of things that we're going to have to redo or pull off the shelf, right? I was in a call where some of these tools are good enough to where if you have a lot of product people understand what they want to build, they can describe it, right? And you have these vibe coding tools like Lovable. Claude Code is fairly accessible, and you can build a pretty good looking application, right? And then the question is then what, right? You don't, if your security rules, if it doesn't scale, if UI doesn't match the rest of the organization, all of these things can happen, right? And so what we don't want to do is we don't want to tell product not to do that. But what we have to be able to do is enable that continuous development to happen together, right? Like, so they build a prototype, they want to push a button and make it go. How do we go from what they built to how we get involved? Right?
Hey, Marty,
Yeah.
One discussion around product versus engineering, is the implication of this that product spends a lot more time in the customer and product, opportunity identification space, and then the prototype to prototype work. And then we take a lot of the kind of weight of, story definitions and the mechanics of product management, agentify that. And so they can spend much more time on what do we really want to build? What does it need to look like? And then later, is it impactful and is it driving the commercial results we're looking for? Is that kind of the way the product role shifts a little bit?
That's what I see. Yeah. And Melissa, jump in, but what I see is that, and the implications are, I think to me, I'm seeing less from the coding agent side. There's less need for a user story, but there still needs to be that connection, right? So some of those mechanics, where do they move, right? And I think we're still working through that. I'm not saying Scrum goes away. I'm not saying Agile dead, none of that. It's just things are going to shift, right? Because what we're seeing is developers now are working on full features. So product managers can focus more of their time on that, right?
Yeah, I mean, in our organization, we tend to have a very flat organization, which is probably not any different than many companies these days. And so our product managers are really burning the candle at both ends, right? They're trying to work with customers and our commercial teams, and they're trying to be, you know, like a product owner of sorts, right? With helping with writing features and stories and all of that. And I think this does help shift them more towards the customer problems and those conversations and takes them out of the weeds a little bit of, you know, having to write features and stories and all of that because you know, the agents are going to help with that. So
When we've been seeing some kind of an interesting trend there, where originally we were like, all the product managers are going to be doing backflips. Like they're like, yay! Like now we can spend all of our time like really focusing on customer problems and like. And there's a segment of product folks who are like all in. They really love that it helps them focus their time on probably what is the most impactful part of their role.
yep.
There are other product folks who have spent a lot of their career in the mechanics of, requirements translation to dev work. And I think that's going to be a little bit of a journey for product managers who are playing more of a PO role, right?
Yeah.
So as we think about that transition, that's something that I don't think was obvious to us at first, but is a big part of the change as well.
I agree with that. And
Yeah.
Marty Kagan agrees with you too if you watch his podcast.
All right. So we got 3 or 4 questions, or I'm sorry, 3 or 4 minutes left. If anybody else has questions, people have been pinging me on the side. But I think the key takeaway here is this is a big topic. For I think our perspective is this is the kind of killer app where AI capability meets real business value this year, right? And so we're building out we have the assessment ready. We've got a scan. Melissa and Marty are building out are writing a book on this topic and releasing chapters incrementally every week or every couple of weeks. What we're talking about doing then is I think next week we're going to do a pretty broad LinkedIn poll on this topic just to see where people are, where different organizations are landing on this topic. And then we're going to kick off a multi-week webinar series on this so we can go a little deeper, maybe roll our sleeves up and show some code and show some applied examples and make this real for folks, because this is the journey that every technical organization that we see is both trying to make and is scaring the heck out of people. So both of those are things that we want to help with. So any other questions before we wrap today's session? Monitoring the Q&A? No? All right. Hey, Melissa, thank you for being our first guest webinar participant. Sure. And also really thank you for partnering and sponsoring a lot of this work for us. We're going to ask you to come back for at least one more of these sessions. Marty, thank you for kind of leading the vanguard on this stuff. If folks are interested in learning more, definitely book some time with us. We're pretty passionate about this and would love to play a role in helping you solve this for your organization. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
have a great day. Bye.
Thanks. See ya.
Cheers, everyone.